crew of about 100 people in the room at any given time. And, once in a while we get a brave new individual who wants to jump up on stage, and everyone's welcome to do that. We have a lot of people that like to listen, and we got a handful of people that like to contribute. And everyone on stage is a regular contributor, and we all know each other incredibly well. And we've got this, we have a nice flow that you'll sense. But don't worry if you just do you, and we can accommodate however you do what you do. So the first thing that we do is allow anyone to share an article about anything, specifically non-tech related, because there's Ukraine going on, and there was this thing called COVID for a while. And then you've got, that there was a big shooting that just happened, and somebody's going through a really messy divorce lawsuit, I hear. And, so some of these big stories are fun to analyze from time to time. But I don't know that is there anything really hot and pressing on the non-tech side of things at the moment, other than
Hey, Tyler.
the NATO
So
issue with
great
Sweden.
to see you back on the first little bubble there with the green beam. So nice to see you there. Target, the retail, how
Oh, yeah.
Target's been affected. I tweeted that out and I was like, where are we going now with basically Walmart and Target not making their numbers?
Right.
So I
Because
mean,
Walmart stock dropped double digits, yesterday.
yeah, and Target's kind of like in a similar boat, and they're
Uh-huh.
like two of the largest. As you know, Tyler, being from California, me being from New York, we know that those are two of the biggest stores. And when our dear beloved trader Joe Chris, he would even say that was one of the things during COVID. It was a drive up in Target, remember, during
Hmm.
COVID. So I'm curious to see what your thoughts are regarding what's going on in the world, and also with Bitcoin, obviously with the markets, how it's going to affect what's going to be on the shelves, because Cal's not around, or is Cal in the Twitter Spaces?
Cal listens to the live stream, which I just started.
Okay, maybe he would have something super amazing to contribute here, because we've both
Oh,
worked in
he's the
retail
best.
with Best
Yeah, yeah,
Buy.
that's right.
So it'd
He
be good
probably
to hear what his thoughts are regarding this, because he's a
calling
tech
Cal,
executive.
calling Cal. No,
Calling Cal Patel.
he'll hear this, and then
Paging Cal
Earth to
Patel.
it's
cow.
like Beetlejuice. If you say Beetlejuice 3 times, Cal Patel shows up. So, paging
So
Mr. Cal Patel.
Um,
Walmart's
yeah,
not, of course, just one of the biggest, but they're one of the tightest as well. By tightest, I mean that in both senses of the word. They manage their expenses down to the nth degree. So if they can't eke a profit out, I think that might be an early indicator.
Yeah,
Pretty much.
that's the obvious point, is that if Walmart's economic figures and numbers are not adding up, that's not a good sign. It's a kind of a foreshadowing of things to come, potentially. Early indicators, as we call them in stock market land. So, yeah.
And Tyler, there's another weird thing that's been happening, which is actually something it's not written about, but like you said, we like to do this in the room. And Netherlands has the largest port in Europe, in Rotterdam, right?
Yep. Uh-huh.
And one of the things I've seen slightly increase, because I have the pleasure of the memory of the subways of New York by living quite close to a subway station and a train station at the same stop, right? Very interesting, the number of Samskit and not Dunks, but is it Samskit, the Icelandic logistics company that was purchased by the Dutch? I just see more freight train logistics coming through more frequently now than last year, because they ride by where I live. And I've observed an increase in those container trains going through. And when I Googled Samskit, I think that's Samskit, I'm not sure, I'll double check it. But when I Googled their logistical chain, ooh, they do the whole chain from like literally Iceland into Netherlands, Rotterdam, and then from Rotterdam to all the parts of Europe, Belgium, Germany, Spain, France, like you name it. It literally gets distributed from here by boat. So it's a very interesting dynamic because of everything going on in the global supply chain. What will be the future chains that will come forward as we start to decouple some of these broader, larger chains that have been super, super like mega chains? What's going to happen? And clearly, because I freelance with SAP. So that's what we do. We do SAP implementations for supply chain worldwide for Fortune 100 companies like Unilever, Kraft, Shell, BP, you name it. But it's very interesting to see the output of in IRL that there's more freight trains going by recently than before, which was last year. So I find that to be really telling because I wonder where they're getting what's coming in and where it's being distributed. Where is the source of the product? Where is the chain beginning and where is it ending? I mean, I could see where it's going into Europe because it comes into Rotterdam, but where is it starting from?
Hmm.
But that could also just be that those are the ports that people are bringing more material in from at this point. They're more capable of handling material quickly. So the material might be transferred to that port and then shipped through
Correct.
alternate means throughout.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And then
it,
now you see why I'm asking the question, right? Because you're right on point with that, what you're tracking with what I'm saying. But mm-hmm, Tyler, Tyler's, Tyler's observation in his tone of that is what's coming. Where's it coming from? Where's the
Hmm.
originating point?
Yeah, yeah. So I found on Barron's an article about they're analyzing what Walmart and Home Depot earnings tell us about consumer spending. And they talk about how housing prices are going up, both in terms of like purchasing cost of purchasing homes, and rentals are remarkably going up. And that's in part because banks are starting to buy up houses in very big quantities and driving the rents up. And that's kind of an interesting new behavior, and that's having downwind effects. And the price of gas is going up. In fact, a friend of mine, my friend Kurdy D, sent a photo from Malibu today where gas is in the U.S. is approaching $7 a gallon at the gas station off the PCH, Pacific Coast Highway. That's I don't know that I've ever seen gas anywhere near that amount. When I was living in the U.S., that's almost unimaginable. $7 a gallon gas. So the combination of these things, yeah, that spells runaway inflation. And to add to that, Putin in the past 24 hours, if I have my numbers correct, very recently in any case, said about the EU weaning itself off of Russian energy, natural gas and oils, and said that it's economic suicide. And I think he himself is surprised that the EU, and disproportionately Germany, have decided to cut off their hand to not have to pay him, $1 billion a day, because it's an ethical and financial issue. And he's surprised that they made the decision to stop buying their energy cheaply from him. Because he might not be wrong, because he did some calculation. I bet he didn't think that would be the outcome. I think he calculated preemptively that the EU would not have the fortitude to get off of the cheap energy, and that the fact that they are doing it is a sort of financial suicide. That it will lead to that, and he might not be wrong in that. That this could have tremendous. This could cause things to spiral out of control, and so
only for the short term, though, right?
yeah,
Only
yeah,
for
yeah,
like the next
not
6 months or so. Yeah.
sure, yeah, well, yeah, not 50 years from now, anyway. But
I think the rental market and the banks, I think the banks are being pretty smart because in the younger generation, when you go into rooms here in Clubhouse, but also other places, people don't want to really put their money anymore into buying their own house. The maybe that changes now with the drop in Bitcoin and stuff like that. But if it's just temporarily, people usually now, younger generations say it makes more sense to have their money in Bitcoin and so on and just rent a place and not put a huge down payment in. And they want to stay flexible. They don't want to live in one place. They can work from home. So maybe that's just a trend switch, which could be a great opportunity for banks to expand their market and just also be landlords that rent properties and not just physical money, and could maybe make a softer fall for the transition to Bitcoin.
Well, you make a good point, but I think that the bigger point is that as rates rise, people just aren't going to be able to afford housing at this point, and the housing market has become in the United States, it's no longer a tax break for you to own a house. They've changed the tax rules over the last 4 years or so, so you cannot write off everything that you used to be able to when owning a house. With rent, you can't write off any of it, but if it winds up that you are still paying the same amount or more to maintain a household and you're not getting the tax benefits to go with it, then it doesn't make sense for you to be bound to one place, when especially in like times of COVID when you might want to just get up and go somewhere else because living in Manhattan no longer is a viable option.
Well, when you're talking about they got rid of the tax break for owning a house, I think you're talking about the SALT deduction, that they're limiting the deductions in some of the high income tax states, but the home mortgage deduction is still intact.
The mortgage deduction, but I'm talking about the real estate taxes.
Oh, because of SALT. Okay, right, yeah, okay. So SALT, by the way, is state and local income taxes. So basically, you used to be able to deduct your property taxes from your state or local property taxes from your federal return, which are now severely limited. Yeah.
But there was also, if even if you were renting, if you were working from home, you could deduct up to, what was it,
Yeah, but the
25%.
big deduction still is for most people the mortgage deduction,
Sure.
unless that's changed.
No, that isn't. But I mean, yeah. But I think the people in New York and California are feeling some of the tax changes more than the rest of the country. But this thing about the it's not so much the banks, they're specialized companies, by the way, like Innovation Homes, okay, that are buying up single family homes because they got into that during the 2008 crash. They said, like, basically institutional investors, and they said, hey, this is a good business. So they're buying up a lot of the inventory, which was actually good for the country back in '08, '09, '10, 2010. It helped, kind of get us out of that. But now they stayed in that business, and people who still want to buy homes, and there are people who want to buy homes, are finding it out of their reach because you have all the institutional buyers who are able to buy, pay cash.
But I
Right.
think the biggest opportunity in this, and it's tech related, is that you've got all this commercial real estate, and I know it's not zoned appropriately for every first time buyer, but with this housing crunch and raising interest rates, and I know that my two nephews are impacted. I'm sure your families are on some level globally about getting into real estate. Is there's a belief that we're all going to go back to an office, and while that's true for some, it's not true for many. So many of these tech and other companies, whether it's JLL or CBRE, they know that these leases are not going to be renewed because all the stats from the hybrid work from home, they're here to stay for the foreseeable future, and I'd say that's a 5 or 10 year run. And I think the commercial real estate builders have an opportunity to open this up to first time home buyers, but they're resistant to that concept, and they're really leaning in to pushing the burden of those leases onto the corporate companies to really drive their employees back to work, and they're not willing to do it. So I think there's a huge opportunity that's
In
not being.
Phoenix, we've already started doing that, but the problem is that this becomes luxury apartments.
Yeah, it doesn't. I agree. It doesn't meet every addressable need, but it's a potential solution that begins to address a need. And there's other different models, tiny homes and different ways of doing that. It's not a panacea for everybody, but I think we're sitting on an opportunity within commercial real estate as it relates to tech and tech workers and others, that there's a huge unmet need that could be designed right now.
Matt,
But
I completely
just
agree with you.
to
And just like the Web three portion. I'm sorry, for cutting that other person off. But just like the Web three portion that Tyler was talking about earlier, this needs to be designed very specifically. If you're going to take commercial properties now and turn them into residential units, you one should think about what it is that the world is turning into if we're no longer going to be having office space. What can we make those spaces into? Can we create common spaces within those buildings that allow for people to still have a community within a building, which I think is what Google is doing on the west side right now.
Right? Absolutely.
well, during COVID, actually in Portugal, Madeira, it's an island, they had big communities of remote workers international, and they turned a luxury during the shutdown. The Portugal gave really tiny bit of incentive to the villages. I think it was like 30,000 euros or so. There's an article about that. Like a big article about that model, uh, to have some community spots in those villages with high speed internet and yoga places and stuff like that, and to have some community teaching people yoga and stuff. And the outcome of this was huge. I think it was a few million um, for the community, because yeah, a lot of people moved there temporarily, and people that are in crypto and in tech and working remotely, and they had that model to turn this luxury hotels into like a community living, and it worked really well, and people were really sad when the tourists came back, because it kind of destroyed that community living. And I think it's a model they wanna around Portugal and then other places that have like a stable climate like that, to do this more longer term and not just during COVID, because it worked well and people were really happy actually. And another thing, a way to invest instead of just buy, is you have now the shared, you have this apps where you can just buy shares of a building, that people are building here in the city, so you can just participate with whatever amount of money you have and put that in and be part of basically the real estate prices going up, instead of putting your money in your own little space. So I think people are just working more towards that, to invest their money smartly than just putting it into a house that you have to constantly renovate and deal with and be annoyed with. So I think that's the trend in the younger generation.
Could
Hey,
I
Tyler,
could I
before
introduce? Go ahead.
no, I just want because Cheryl had something pinned at the top and it disappeared. So before the whole thing moves, she had a story on because I back channeled her because it was very
Target.
related to Walmart. Yeah, to Walmart. What you were discussing was that Target stock is down like 25% this morning, which Target stores are a big, at least in the United States, they're a big something very similar to, not exactly similar to Walmart, but a big general retailer. They don't generally sell food though, as Walmart sometimes does. But
And Target does sell food, actually.
they do sell food.
Yeah,
Okay,
they do.
okay, you can see how well
And
they're not going to
Walmart
Target.
pretty much always sells food.
Well, I said they do. I said, but I thought I didn't realize that Target sells food as much as Walmart.
Yeah,
Because
you can actually even find like organic, surprisingly, in Target.
wow,
Yeah,
I didn't even know.
Yeah,
that's the reason, Ken.
And in
That's
Walmart.
that's the reason I
And,
brought up Trader Joe Chris. Remember, Tyler? This is what he used to say when we were hanging in the pandemic. All of us in the room, like last year, he would always talk about how like he was going to do the drive up at Target and they had groceries as well. Not
Does
everyone.
Does Target sell produce also? Really?
Yes,
Yeah, it
yeah,
does.
they really
Absolutely.
did the. Annette,
Wow.
when did they change that? They changed it a while ago. Didn't Target change it a while ago?
Oh,
The
I don't know.
dog
All I
food.
know is that the few times that I've been to Target, they have absolutely had, some Targets have had giant food sections, others much smaller depending on the size of the store. But yeah, I mean, I was shocked to see that they had like organic bananas and strawberries.
Is
So
Target a discount shop?
No,
Tar-
It's not?
not not really, but it's a shop with ordinary prices. It's not a fancy shop.
it's
That's
not
And
right.
it's not like a Walmart prices, but
right,
it's
but
definitely not high retail or high end and
it's known for its good design
Mm.
and the good design of its products. I go there all the time.
It's
In
basically
fact,
a.
I was there yesterday. Can tell
Mm.
me what they have, too much inventory or too little, and I'll tell you what I saw.
Well, they mostly was talking about margins. They are saying they're seeing a product mix shift. People are buying luggage rather than, I mean, that's the thing that's, so luggage sales went up, other things went down. But there was a lot of margin pressure, and also they've got supply chain issues. Those were all of the reasons for why they missed the numbers. You know.
Yeah,
They're
Ken, it
Well,
seems
I
like
can't
they.
believe it's not easy for them to predict luggage is going up because travel has come back and everybody is traveling with a vengeance. So of course they need luggage. That's pretty funny.
And then
You would
also
think that a high
Dr.
retail, yeah, go ahead.
Dr. Fran, there's one interesting one that I don't know if people are looking at as well with all the pandemic and the people that have to leave their houses. I know I've heard of one woman that literally became a like a digital nomad, and she's probably in her mid 30s, maybe early late 30s, and she pretty much packed everything up into suitcases and boxes and put it in her mom's house. So I think there's way more reasons why people were buying luggage to more than just travel. I think with the digital nomads and people maybe having to leave their apartments because they can't afford the leases anymore, they may have to put something in storage, and putting stuff in storage, it may be easier to do some stuff in suitcases if it's really nice clothing, that it'll be protected from moths or weather issues, and then the rest in storage boxes. So I'm just saying, or if you're kind of putting it in someone's garage, there's just a lot of reasons. And I don't necessarily believe that everyone's traveling that much, because
Well,
a lot of flights.
the airline reservation systems, and the hotels and the travel advertising. I'm an ad tech, and the one place where this we see a lot of increase in advertising is travel. Everyone's going on
yeah,
vacations.
Amy, I was actually just retained by a company for travel, and their business
Then this
is
is then
increasing
this is going to
exponentially.
dovetail nicely to Annette and Dr. Fran's statement. Did anyone notice the hostile takeover that
I think you're talking about Dr. Francine,
Yeah,
right?
Dr. Francine, sorry.
JetBlue, yeah, JetBlue and Spirit.
Yeah, like the
I
hostile
just
takeover
wanted
of
Yeah,
to
JetBlue of Spirit Airlines.
I wanted to mention van life because many people I know are shifting out of their apartments and decking out their vans and living in those uh, RVs type situation, giving up completely on the dream of holding an apartment or land or something. Because it gives them increased mobility and align with their minimalistic lifestyle. Putting a
you have to
comment.
be young to do that, though. If you
Correct.
have a family, it's hard to do.
Commenting on real estate development, I've been in it for a number of years, even though I've shifted into Web3. One of the hardest things is whether the government infrastructure can keep up with, innovation. Because in real estate development, that was one of the hardest things I dealt with because I was trying to get more smart hardwares into buildings, getting them to be more autonomous and then have longer longevity as well. Because if you think about it, it's kind of crazy that in our building system, when a pipe leaks, that almost every building, you're going to have a water problem, just a matter of when. Half the time, you just don't know when it's happening. And then it's just a huge ordeal to even find it out. But how slow the cities move. is really halting our ability to even implement new technologies because they just make it so difficult and strenuous. And that kind of leaks beyond, regular living in the city, but even beyond into, I was looking into projects whether you can create self-sustainable housing, and then, have your own water sources and all those things. But because entering into those kind of markets, it's when you're kind of the first one, they make it so difficult, that it kind of makes you wonder whether it's one thing to have the technology and resources to be able to bring us to the level we need to be, but I guess on the governmental level, how difficult they're going to make it, or if they will upgrade themselves to, allow these necessities in. So, yeah.
Yeah, if I could chime in on that point, because I've attended 5 community planning meetings in the last 2 months. That is a direct consequence, and that's not my favorite thing to do by a long shot.
It's the worst.
Uh, yeah, they're horrible. And what's happening in California, throughout the country, Boston Globe had a great story on this just a couple days ago. Um, there's this attempt to address housing problems by upzoning. And by upzoning, I mean in single family, typical suburban communities, they are upzoning to where developers are coming in with this upzoning and buying 4 or 5 houses in a row, perfectly good houses, tearing them down and building 5-story apartment complexes. And the city had pushed really hard on the stealth plan that they spent 2 years creating without input from the community, where they were essentially declaring that single family dwellings could be acquired and these 5-story high density apartments could be built with no setback. So you could have your neighbor sell their home to a developer, and you could have a 5-story, instead of being in a typical single family dwelling environment, have a 5-story apartment at your fence, not even a 10-foot setback, but at your fence with 5 stories of people staring into your backyard. And needless to say, the community revolt was profound because they had done this all with stealth planning. This is happening all over the country, particularly in California, particularly near universities where the rebound in enrollment is further amplifying the housing shortage. And so there are these contests where if you have an educated residential community that push back, they're succeeding in pushback. Where you have communities that are not as educated, not as capable in the ways of fighting City Hall, you're seeing 5-story apartment complexes with no setbacks going in residential neighborhoods. The argument being that this is the way to solve the housing crisis. This is the way to get mixed housing. There's things that I think many of us support, myself included. But net new development ought to have much more of a mixed housing model like that, where at least people buying into that environment know what they're getting into. But this is like a form of eminent domain, where in the U.S., those not familiar with the U.S., if they want to put in a new road or a new trolley or whatever, they can condemn your house and take it over forcibly with quote fair market value, and put in public resources. They're doing this in ways that resemble eminent domain without calling it eminent domain. And in defense of their actions at a meeting last night, they basically said, "Oh, we're not taking anything from you. We're just bringing more housing opportunities so that UCSD students, when they graduate, have an inexpensive place to stay." So there is some social engineering going on at scale around the country, rather than using undeveloped land or blighted areas that would be good to upgrade. They're going into established communities and allowing developers. And this circle back to the point about infrastructure. There are huge infrastructure deficits everywhere. It's been much neglected in many parts of the country, and they're compounding that problem without any compensatory, not even a catch up in infrastructure. They are literally increasing the gap between residents and the infrastructure available. So this is a phenomenon that is gaining traction all over the country.
Oh, John, you should see downtown Phoenix. It's exactly, there's some deal where if you only do 5 stories, it's one kind of infrastructure requirement. I think it's that you can build with wood instead of steel. And so people, there's like all these 5-story apartment buildings right around the ASU downtown center, and it's making ASU the largest landowner, land developer, and beneficiary because they also get the students. It's interesting to see some of these problems that we've created. And if you look at things, I'm writing a blog post on the interconnectedness of all things. I know that sounds like bullshit, but it's not. I mean, it's amazing how these things connect to each other and we're causing one problem after another.
And
Well,
And by
that's
the way,
so
not
there's a
evident.
Canadian
Sorry,
author
just
out of
one
Vancouver
point.
who's written 5 books on upzoning, advocating for upzoning. He historically was one of the biggest advocates of upzoning, and what he's witnessed as a consequence of a movement that he really supported academically, he has seen real estate values where upzoning has occurred go the opposite direction of what was predicted, that the higher density increases the value of the land, which increases the value of the property in every single domicile on that property. And so his last book says, oops, I was wrong. It does the opposite of what I'd intended. So what's happening is these city planners are responding to the mayors who are responding to the developers who give them their campaign contributions, who want to come in and put up this infrastructure without having put up the housing without having to pay for infrastructure. They're piggybacking it on existing infrastructure that's already behind, making a tidy profit because they don't have to deal with the infrastructure commensurate with their building. So this is a developer, campaign contributor. So to your interconnectedness, Dr. Francine, I hope you're addressing that point because there's a cycle of campaign funding and reelection that is fueling this because the developers are walking away with money in the pocket that should have gone into infrastructure.
yeah, and to John's, can I just add a couple things to John's point, and then actually, John, because you're in California, I could ask you a question, even though I used to live in California for a long time. In eminent domain, for those who are not Americans, the government would actually have to compensate you if they take your property. What John is describing is basically almost like an effective eminent domain where people are not getting compensated. And I don't want to, I don't want to get off topic and have another debate about something else, but just as a tech, I just want to make the point from a legal perspective, not debate the issue. Another type of taking would be like rent control, an effective taking of, and the Supreme Court has never held that rent control constitutes a taking for eminent domain. The Supreme Court generally has weakened eminent domain protections. There was a case in Connecticut several years ago that was a commercial redevelopment, where basically the government took someone's private property, handed it to another private developer to, basically like do an whole economic redevelopment zone, and didn't, just, and this guy didn't really compensate that person. So there were not a lot of the eminent domain protections are falling by the wayside. Some states have actually increased their protection since that Supreme Court decision. And the other point I wanted to make on this, or question, John, I wanted to ask you because you're out there. Didn't California just in the last 2 years pass a state law to override local zoning so they can increase the?
Yeah, it's called SB9,
Yeah.
and it has a lot of infrastructure mitigations. It has a lot of mitigations inside it, and the city planning here was saying, "Oh, this is just SB9. The state legislature made us do it. We have no option. Our hands are tied. We have to conform to SB9." And then they stripped away all the mitigations of SB9. They intensified the upzoning from I think like 12 units per acre to 29 units per acre. I mean, it's just the abusiveness of local governments because of this funding cycle of political campaigns and the developers lobbying the politicians who are supporting this, and then hiding under they're using SB 9, State Bill 9, which is on this very topic, as camouflage for extracting more profit without paying for infrastructure. It's really um,
And John, this is
I
so
would
nothing
wait,
underhanded.
new.
Kim,
This is nothing
before you
new, by
go
the
down
way.
this rabbit hole, I do want to just point out with the eminent domain, these people are being compensated for the purchasing of their property. A developer is buying their property. In eminent domain, it's the person who owns the property who's losing it that's losing out. In this case, it's the people that are around that property that are losing out, because the people who sold their houses and someone else is building a building on their house, they were probably compensated, and compensated well for their property, in order for that developer to acquire enough pieces together to build the site that they're looking to build.
That's
Yeah,
exactly right,
Yeah,
and
that's
it's
Again,
causing
exactly my
neighbor
point.
neighbor on neighbor combat because
not
a neighbor.
always.
Okay, may I make that point I was trying to
Hold
make
on.
earlier?
John, have you finished? John, have you finished?
I'm sorry, John. Please finish.
No, go ahead. I want to hear others' views. Go ahead.
Okay,
Yeah,
Dr.
if I could
Francine.
jump
Well,
in here in a
in
second
Phoenix,
when you guys get a
people
chance.
were never properly compensated when they were relocated. Never. So, eminent domain, where they say they give you market value, is always
Oh,
bullshit.
no, no, no. I'm not talking about in the case of eminent domain. Yes, that is correct. I'm talking about in this case. This is not eminent domain. They did not go in and claim these properties as eminent domain and just take them and give them fair market value. These properties were purchased and acquired by developers at fair market, or at probably at higher than their market value, in order to consolidate five pieces of property together. You know, the first three they might buy at a reasonable price, but those last two they're paying up on price in order to ensure that they have them all located closely together, so they can get the proper FAR for their zoning in order to build what it is that they're looking to build.
Aram, Aram.
Thank you. I was just trying to make the same point that the neighbors and the rest of the property owners lose the value when this kind of construction happens. Same kind of devaluation of the property happens when someone tries to put their property for example on Airbnb and making it like a commercial neighborhood. Rest of the people who are in that neighborhood lose their value, and the rezoning is happening here as well in south without public's approval, and that rezoning is purely directed to profit the people who are trying to build these properties after the rezoning, filling up their pocket, and cities kind of complicit with that, and that's the trend is very concerning to me.
Hey,
Okay.
John, everything John described though with the developers and political contributions, this has been going on around the country for years. This is like nothing. It's just that people are just figuring it out or paying attention. It's been going on for
Exactly.
decades. And I
Exactly.
can tell you that in Los Angeles when I lived there, basically all of Marina Del Rey, if you go to the Marina Del Rey, which is just north of the airport, the entire development there, which is because that's a county area, unincorporated county, is all based on whatever property developers contributed to the campaigns of the people running for the Los Angeles County Commission. And we've already seen that even when I was living in LA, they would go into like West Los Angeles and take these small, cheaper homes, single family homes built in the 1950s, and they would raise them and they would put up 3 4 unit condos, and they got more value out of that. So basically that led to real estate price increases, not decreases. And by the way, there's no parking. Okay, so the streets, I always made this point for those who are Americans who might be old enough to have remembered seeing, even if you saw reruns because you weren't alive, of Dragnet with Jack Webb and all of that, and you remember the beginning scenes, they showed all the different parts of LA. The Pico Boulevard and the Olympic Boulevard that were in the TV series Dragnet in the 1960s, they're no wider today than they were in 1960. But they built all this development around it, and where do you think the cars go? I mean, it's incredible. Like he talks about the infrastructure, and he had sewers and everything else, but even the streets generally, right? That's why the traffic is so bad on the streets. Never mind the freeways. One of the things I remember when I left Los Angeles, the freeway traffic actually it started to get somewhat better from what people used to think of LA freeway traffic maybe in the 70s a little bit, but the surface traffic was even worse because they had done all of this all of these areas had become that much more dense. And anyway, I'm done speaking.
Just to
Yeah,
share
if
a
I
couple
could
of things
jump
from
in here for
California.
Hold on. I think Maha wants to speak after that, Ben.
yeah, hey everybody, Mayor here. I know I've been off Clubhouse for a while, just jumping back in, but on this mobile movement that's happening, actually, I'm planning on kind of jumping in real life. I'm headed up to Breckenridge June 1st to the 8th, like just get away for a while, mountain bike and fish and hunt and camp and stuff. But I don't know if you guys have heard of Boxable, Boxabl. They got these fold out homes, right, that are getting some traction. There's a big van life movement that everybody's kind of aware of, but I think a space that's ripe for like expansion is imagine there's currently for trucks there's like overlanders, but they're not really cool. They're just little pop-up things that are not so cool, but you can actually potentially make a 3-bedroom pop-out style home that fits into the back of a truck, right? So like I drive a truck right now. I got a Chevy Silverado custom Trail Boss, and I'm thinking, okay, you can have an insert that kind of goes in. It's mobile, and then it folds out, so you'll have everything you need. You could just have like propane running, some stuff, some battery, and solar, and carry some of your water. And the nice thing about that, because I've been looking at doing the RV movement for a while, is it's hard to kind of carry a trailer and where you're going to park it and all this other stuff. But if you have some type of fold out solution, like the Boxable style, but for trucks, I think that might be a big game changer. So I'm gonna try to rig something up to do that, especially with everything you guys are talking about, right? I mean, like get the mortgage rates going up, all these complexities of owning the home, the costs associated with that, and now that Starlink is up and operational, and recently, it's unofficial, but you're able to have a mobile Starlink system where whether you're in a desert, whether you're in the mountains, you've got connectivity. Everybody's more virtual now. So, I think the kind of more nomadic lifestyle, just especially with everybody kind of working virtual, makes a lot of sense. So by the way, if anybody's got some solutions that they've seen some kind of fold out system that's a little bit more advanced that is out of a truck bed, because for me that makes more sense than a van, because you just a van's enclosed, whereas a truck bed you could really fold out a unit. I'd be happy to look at that. So that's just a thought there on what I think can come
I
in the
think there
future.
is another
Yes,
option
Meher, I
for
was.
those people who can work remotely. I pinned an article on top. If you can work remotely, you can consider the digital nomad life. And this gentleman, 33-year-old American, who went to Bali, like what Tyler say, you can have get a lot of value out of your US dollar. So this 33-year-old American is living in Bali. In a life of luxury with just 2,233
Yeah,
a month. So it's pinned
tons.
on
There's
top for reference.
there's thousands
And
of
for the
Yeah, and
people.
I
foldables
just
I was alluding to earlier, Rivian Truck have a complete foldable system that they are coming up with. So is Cybertruck, and there are many other companies. I can link you with it. And as Dr. Francine was mentioning earlier, this is just for young people, not for families. I disagree. There are families who are completely mobile. They homeschool their children online, and because of the Starlink and the connect, they can go anywhere, connect online, give their children the classes and schooling, and their children actively participate in this lifestyle. They grow their own food, they have their water supply and energy, and they spend their days and nights by oceans and in desert and everywhere. So this is a movement, and it's happening in terms of solution for these housing problems.
So I'd
Better
just like
than
to
I
chip
thought,
in for a
Aaron.
second.
Actually, I think
Yeah,
Elon
I think
Musk
we can
probably
let
could
Ben
answer.
Trison speak because I think he have lots of experience on this. Ben?
Yeah. So
I lived exclusively on a vehicle for about 5 years continuously. Plus, we do homeschool our kids, but that's tangential. So just to Rum's point. So what I can give you is a picking list of things you better be sure you've got sorted. Having list. So power depends on your latitude. You may not find that solar and batteries is enough. We certainly at 52 degrees latitude, with any reasonable lifestyle, had to have a diesel generator as well. So now you've got to fill your jet generator up. So remember that. Water. Tens of liters a day per person, hundreds if you really want to shower and enjoy yourself and have a normal lifestyle. Depends how much adjustment you want to make. So remember, fresh water's got to come from somewhere. Rainwater collection's a little harder than you think, and making it possible is harder than that. Possible, but think about water. Think about where you're going to get rid of both types of water. You've got black water, which is your shit and piss, and then you've got grey water, which is everything that comes out of your sinks. Where's that legally and responsibly going, and where's it going to end up? Food. You've got to source enough calories for your whole family. You're not going to have enough acreage of land you're on, so you've got to think about where your food's coming from and anywhere any food waste is going to. Internet's covered these days. Deliveries, you're not going to, Amazon probably won't deliver to you. So think about all that long tail of things that you expect. They're rubbish. Every time you buy something, if you go to shops, then you've got to think about where you're going to get rid of your rubbish. That's going to accumulate, particularly plastic waste, difficult to do anything with. Yeah, so they're the things. I mean, there's a picking list. So think about power, water, food, internet, both types of wastewater, rubbish, as in trash, I think you American chaps would call it. Internet, as you say, is covered these days. Yeah, given that, you're kind of covered. Landowners Commission, it's cool. It's a fun lifestyle, but you're totally dependent on other people for all your basic needs. Ultimately, that's what I found anyway.
So Ben, you've actually done this yourself. Like you've lived out
Yeah, yeah,
there.
for many years. Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
sweet man, I'd love to connect with you and get more of your feedback because I'm ready just to get away, man. Working, I just
You
want to
can.
get into the mountains.
Yes,
Yeah, yeah. No,
Nomad
I mean, it's
can.
obviously possible. Otherwise, I'd be dead. So I was just saying there's a lot of things to consider.
There's
Yeah, one of the things that I wanted to add is around the challenge of regenerating inner cities, because that's where the big problems are at the moment. And one of the issues around regenerating of a city is it has typically clustered all sorts of problems in a single area. So we have low income, we have low opportunity, we have low education outcomes, and we have crime, drug abuse, and drug dealing, and all sorts of issues, right, in inner cities. So one of the driving principles under regeneration is how do you break up such clustering? How do you get rid of that? So from
be right back.
inner cities, sorry, yeah. So one of the things that people involved in regeneration are currently looking at, and it's alluding to some of those. Development proposals is that they are seeing that if you can destroy these clusters, then and provide opportunities for low income families within middle class or upper class environments, then their children will get better outcomes, they will go to better schools, and you'll break the cycle of poverty. And that's really what's driving this. So there is, and somebody alluded to this earlier, a huge amount of, if you like, social engineering behind these issues. One other aspect of social engineering was the idea that if you don't provide parking and make it harder for people to own a car, you are going to force them into alternative modes of transport, and those alternative modes of transport are typically more environmentally friendly. So I just wanted to say that when we look at all of these development proposals, and obviously developers see the opportunity, and for instance here in London, uh, developers have got huge bonanza because of the so-called housing crisis, and they've just about taken all sorts of land and created high-rise buildings, which are not the likes of their neighbors, but on the pretext that they are doing something to solve the housing problem, but it's got
Well,
nothing
Fo-
that's
to
what
do with
China
housing.
did.
Follow the money. Follow the money in
That's
Cancun
what China did.
contributions.
China tore up all the really attractive traditional developments in Shanghai and made them into high rises. Aram, I would just like to talk to recommend to you, even though Ben says it's not only a young person's movement, there is a movie called Nomadland. It almost won the Best Picture in 2020, and it's about a widow in her 60s, played by Frances McDormand, who gets rid of all her stuff and gets in a van and travels around, and what it's like for her and who she meets. And
Yeah, it's
it's
fantastic.
it's sobering.
Agree.
Both
There's
of my
also
Yeah,
well,
Chloe Zhao won
Yeah,
the best director
hold
for
on.
Oscar for that movie. It's not
there's
the best,
also
Um,
it's the best
both
Oscar director.
both of my grandparents have done that for as long as I can remember.
there's also a Spanish film. There's also a Spanish film that kind of takes a look at a woman who also does that, but she does it for also different reasons as well. But it's a very interesting and really fascinating. It's a well produced film, but this is just when you start getting a lot of these Spanish directors and international directors. They really do some great independent work for sure.
Okay, I have
Wait,
a
what
hard.
was the name? What was
Hold
the
on.
name of that movie? Nomad Land. Is that what you said, Francis?
Yes, it is.
Yeah,
It's
Nomad
Chloe Zhao was the
Yes,
director.
nomad
Land.
land,
And
made in 2020.
another option for older
And
people is to live on the cruise ships. People do that too.
I just want to say something about
wow.
boring.
John's about the local regulation versus housing. I'm in California. What he was referring to in terms of SB 9 is very interesting. On the one hand, the state legislature has, established the SB 9 to encourage essentially moving single-family zoning to literally fourplex each land. But local government, in their effort to sort of fight that, it's kind of funny. The near where I live, the town of Woodside tries to, against their still doing that, but they at least try to establish that they're exception to this state law by claiming they are a mountain lion preserve in habitat, so that they will not be subject to the regulation. But that didn't work very well. So on top of that, the developers' influence, it's going to be a double whammy in my mind in terms of in California, because the local developers are, definitely vested in pushing legislation that they can build as much as they want or they can. And the recent Supreme Court case is going to be making campaign financing a lot easier, if you will, for money to be influencing political contributions without having the restricted ability to fund yourself, repay yourself, reimbursement your funding. So, really rich people have now more of a freedom to actually engage in political processes without the campaign finance restrictions, the $250,000 restrictions. And that was the case just came out with Ted Cruz being the winner in that case. So that is going to be something to watch in the near future.
Nomad Jane.
Yes, thank you for letting me speak. I just wanted to bring in a different perspective because I think there was a comment about, this is for young people. I am an immigrant here in United States. I moved here in 2004 from Kenya in Africa. And having lived in Minnesota for 16 years, the entire time I was here in United States, in 2020, we sold our home right when the schools were initiating distance learning, and we had already been thinking about homeschooling our three children. And so when we did the distance learning, it was kind of an aha moment that we can totally school our children. And so during that summer, we got our house ready, put it on the market. sold it and have been traveling the United States since October 2020. We have not yet embraced the RV life because we did our benefits and risk, and we decided, it's more beneficial to not have the RV. So we go around using the Airbnb. We rent Airbnbs. We've been through 33 states and are homeschooling, road schooling, world schooling our children. And there was one more thing I was going to say, that train of thought that just went off. But I just wanted to say or encourage anyone who's thinking of that it's totally possible. My husband and I and our 3 children have been able to do it. And I have been able to partner with a lot more people. I've seen single mothers with 4 kids doing this. I've seen pregnant people doing this and giving birth on the road. So it's totally doable. And the way the economy is headed and everything is going, I think just being able to take charge of your family structure and navigating these nuances is going to become very crucial for us. Thank you for letting me speak.
Okay, so we got to move on. Just a couple of quick notes. I have a hard stop in an hour, and we have a follow. I'm hosting another room after this one, starting in 2 hours from now, and that's all about technology, as you can imagine. So I want to say that that Boxable company that Maher mentioned has a wait list of 70,000 customers to fulfill, speaking to the incredible demand for a new solution for some form of housing somewhere between a traditional house and a tent, previously filled by mobile homes, but and Boxables are not so entirely different from mobile homes, really. Anyway, but kind of rebranded as in a palatable way, I guess. The next thing, we got to go into the tech headlines, and then we'll go into the tweets. And thank you to everyone who's sharing all of the tweets. You can share tweets too. Just simply include our Twitter handle as part of your tweet, TNATW. So put the @ symbol, TNATW, and then we can see it. And if we like it, we will retweet it and share it with everyone. And we might even read it in the room like we're going to do after we go through these big tech headlines that we have, and we love to go through every day. So we need the air horn to make it official, because we are all.
Cal Patel was here briefly, but he left.
I know. I was just about to hand it over to Cal, because we invoked him in.
Yes.
To ask him about retail, and one of the big non-tech headlines, as it is the Walmart and downturn, and Target and the consumer shopping phenomena, and what he might be able to tell us about Best Buy, having been one of the leaders of Best Buy. Anyway, hopefully he can fill us in. He can DM in the chat or whatever. So here we go. Where's the air horn? There it is. Hold on. Let's go. All right. So the top story today is from a lot of people reporting that Twitter's board says it intends to close the transaction, quote unquote, and at the agreed upon price, and enforce the merger agreement. I don't think that. How are you going to force somebody to buy something that they no longer want to buy, or certainly at the price that? Yeah. Well, by the way, Elon has also sort of responded in a way by saying that the purchase is on hold, because his price that he named was based on if all of the things that Twitter says in their SEC filings is true. And what he's referring to is that here's the tweet right here. I'm retweeting it right now. There it goes. It says 20% fake spam accounts, while 4 times, and he's referring to Twitter spam bots being up to about 20% as he estimates it, while 4 times what Twitter claims could be much higher, meaning Twitter claims that spam and fake accounts are 5% of Twitter accounts. He believes it's much higher, like 20% or even higher. He says, my offer, this is a tweet that I just shared at the Tech News Twitter account. I just retweeted his tweet, which says, my offer to buy Twitter was based on Twitter's SEC filings being accurate. which say that the Twitter bots are 5%. Yesterday, Twitter's CEO publicly refused to show proof of that the Twitter bots are 5% or less. The deal cannot move forward until he does. So Elon Musk is making a very strong statement that the deal is off until Twitter can prove that the bots are what they say that they are in their SEC filings, because I'm not going to purchase something until we can prove, and there's reason to doubt because you're reluctant to prove what you claim in your SEC filings. And then it gets crazier. Oh boy, does it get crazier. A guy named John Rich, who's a verified Twitter account, says, I have to think Elon Musk knew that this was the case before he moved on Twitter or offered to buy Twitter.
Exactly.
If Twitter lied about how many actual users they have to the SEC, we're looking at a company that has perpetuated fraud on its shareholders and advertisers. Big trouble for the Twitter commies. To which Elon Musk replies, absolutely. And I will retweet that now so you can see that. So again, to
Hey,
recap,
Tyler, Cal's
yes,
back at the bottom in the bottom, by the way.
awesome. Thank you,
Told,
Tim.
It's on top.
So hold that thought.
I told him you're going to work him in.
Okay, good. So again, to recap, the big headline today is Twitter's board says they intend to close the transaction at the agreed upon price and enforce the merger agreement. How the hell are you going to force somebody to pay you $44 billion? How are you going to force them? You're going to go to a court and the court's going to be like, yep, sir, you have to send $44 billion to this company. You're going to tell that court to go shove it where the sun don't shine. You can't force me to spend $44 billion.
So Tyler, one thing, there's a breakup fee about $1 billion. So
Correct. Well, that's the
presumably that's
worst
something.
case. Worst
Yeah,
case. Yes.
No,
yeah.
but
So
actually, they can under narrowed circumstances, basically get a court to order to enforce the breach. So I mean, it could be beyond the $1 billion. And by the way, they also the Twitter board company itself, and I want to give it over to Cal because I'm the one who told them that we would give him the time if he came
Sure.
back. But they what they did say is that Elon didn't raise any of these issues. He didn't do any due diligence. If he had concerns about this issue, he could have raised it with them before even making the final bid or whatever. But he apparently didn't do any due diligence, so that works against him. So anyway, if you want to give it over to
Well, yeah,
Cal,
except that he's been talking to Jack Dorsey throughout the entire process, so it's hard to believe
Checkmate.
that he didn't know what was up.
Right. Now, that's where it gets into, and we're going to hand it to Cal. Welcome back, Cal. And it says in this tweet, he believes that there's a big bot problem, and my offer was based on Twitter's SEC filings are accurate, and the CEO is publicly refusing to show proof of what they claim in their SEC filings. This deal cannot move forward until he does. And again, this person, John Rich, says, I have to think that Elon... Now, there's a hidden gem of insight in this tweet. I wonder if you can find it. Watch what happens. Everyone's going to miss this. I missed it the first time I read it. There's this guy, John Rich. He's going to say something that I'm going to read. Elon Musk is going to respond to him, and I'm going to read the response first again. Now watch what happens when you read these in reverse order. Something magical appears. Elon Musk's response to John is one word, a one-word response. Absolutely. The word Elon uses to respond to what I'm about to read is absolutely. Okay, now what is Elon responding to in saying absolutely? Here's what Elon is responding to. I have to think that Elon knew this was the case before he moved on Twitter. Let me pause right there. Because this guy, John Rich, is suggesting that Elon knew what was going on at Twitter before that this whole issue of bots was an issue before he even offered to buy it. Now, if Elon disagreed with that claim, Elon would not respond to that guy's tweet with the word absolutely.
Correct. And Tyler, this goes back to his relationship with Jack.
Right. So that's why I said there's a gem
And
of wisdom here, because
you
it's
have to believe that he cleared all this with his attorneys because this has been going on for quite a while.
And
because
also,
there's
what I mentioned earlier, he have smart people surrounding him, and the investors and the McKinsey people and analysts inform him the price is too high, and they were going to bring the price down to the equal amount which it deserves, which is now he's going for.
okay. Here's my point. This guy John Rich basically says a couple of things. He says that Elon knew what was going on beforehand. That's claim number one. If Twitter lied about how many actual users they have to the SEC, we're looking at a company that has perpetuated fraud on its shareholders and advertisers. Big trouble for the Twitter communists. That's claim number two. There's two claims. One, Elon Musk knew all of this before he made the offer. Claim number two, Twitter is lying to the SEC and its shareholders. Elon responds with one word: absolutely. Which of those two claims is he referring to? I have news for you. He must be referring to both, because
Hmm.
nobody at that level
Exactly.
is going to risk saying it to one and not the other. The guy is, believe it or not, this guy is that smart. He's smarter than your high school calculus teacher, this guy. Believe it or not. And he knows in responding with this word that he cannot do that unless he's meaning in meaning to respond to both claims simultaneously. He would not risk saying absolutely unless he meant that to be applicable to both claims. So everyone's going to miss that and assume he's referring to the second claim, when in fact he's referring to both. So he's revealing in a very subtle way that he did know before he made the offer about this. Well, how could he have known that? Well, you just heard on stage that, in fact, he has been talking with Jack before all of this went down. And we even surmised that before this whole rigmarole drama even got started, that Jack Dorsey was stepping down from Twitter in some kind of weird move to facilitate his longer term vision for Twitter, which is to get it out of whatever situation that it's currently in. We suggested that as the plausible reason why Jack Dorsey's stepping down from this company that his identity is so permanently tied to, that he is so emotionally tied to at its core. Why would he step down from such a thing? Well, there must be some really interesting Shakespearean drama going on in the back, and that apparently that is what's happening. And Elon just kind of gave us another hint there, a little foreshadowing.
Well, there's also an observation I heard it a couple days ago that if there's a fork in the road and one path leads to whatever Jack wants to make it, there's multiple paths this could go down with Elon, but one observation is that this is just a proxy for what he's doing, trying to bring the bad tech out of good, or what's left in good, and that this is just a proxy for the midterms in terms of election intentions and voter fraud and all that. I just thought that was just an interesting point of view. I'm not saying whether I believe or don't believe in it. I wouldn't put anything past Elon, but this as a proxy, having nothing to do with this alone, as it stands on its own 2 feet, but some broader ambitions far beyond Tesla and Twitter.
I
I don't
think
know
it
if
depends on
hold on,
whether
Ben, hang on. Did Cal? I don't know if you want to jump in on this Twitter claim. The reason we initially evoked the great Cal to join us was because we were talking about
Great guy.
Walmart.
There's nothing great about me, trust me. Okay.
We were
Walmart
talking
and
about
Target.
Target and Walmart, and thought you might have an interesting insight in this. And that's kind of your neck of the
Yeah,
woods.
no, yeah, I do. Yeah. So, no, I don't want to take you away from the Twitter. I'm loving the Twitter discussion, so we can finish that off if you want.
Okay. Okay.
I'd
So
say something about Twitter. Yeah, I've been reading your stuff. I totally get your premise, right? I mean, he knew about it. He knew exactly how many. I mean, what he has a hypothesis of how many bots there are on the platform. He seems to have the Twitter management team in a corner right now, right? And And then the question is this about negotiating a better price and then eventually getting a better deal done, or does he just walk away now? This is too difficult. I fall into, I don't know, it's 50-50, 51-49. I fall into, I think he's, based on watching his nuance in the latest, we get public data on him, right? Because he talks a lot out there. Compared to other CEOs, frankly, he's more transparent, right? Because he's always out there. So you can actually see his body language. You can try and assess more anyway. But from the all-in pod that he was at, which is the latest one I looked at, he and I think Cheryl mentioned it in the back chat as well, which I totally agree with. He's very consumer driven. I mean, he sees opportunities. So he was mentioning WeChat, and so I think he obviously saw potential of a much better commercial viable Twitter, right? With some kind of proxy for it to be in a WeChat of the US, right? With payment built in and all that kind of stuff built in, and just being seamless, the interface being much better, etc. So he kind of saw that, and then there were two ways he could do that. He could build it himself, or he could take something and then he could play some, and then, of course, he had this other view. I'm not saying that's not genuine, that he wants to deal with some, broader issue that he sees in the world about how we're all going to get screwed up because of free speech, right? So he kind of has that in the background. But I'm falling. My view right now is that he wants to. He's done with this thing, but he also has these guys in a corner, so he can get what he wants. He can decide to buy it at a much lower price, or he can walk away. I think he'll get away with either of those outcomes that he wants. But maybe I'm just too Elon, biased on that. But I think he's very smart.
Okay. And what about Walmart and Target?
Yeah. So yesterday, when I've been watching those results, because just kind of what I do, I've been doing it for years, and now by habit. I used to do it when I was at Best Buy, and now we just, you watch retail results. They tell you consumer patterns, and they just give you indications, real indications, because these are large companies, and when their results come out, or what they say, or indication that they give, gives you a sense. Everything else is, there's a lot of noise in the marketplace, and you kind of get a real sense of. And if they're good execution companies, and I would generally say Doug McMillan is one of the best execution guys, CEOs that is out there. He used to run the international business, and then he's just really good. And maybe he'll make some mistakes, and they'll get it wrong, maybe broadly, but he's going to have a good sense of it from Walmart. That is. So when Walmart's results came out yesterday, it was a strong signal for me that the U.S. consumer I mean, we know has been suffering, right? Gas prices now $4. It's not, summer holidays coming up. People are poor. People live. We're not in that big luxury where everyone's like, has extra amounts in their bank, right? So they're living hand to mouth, and then if you get like a 9-10% increase in the things that matter to people, this becomes huge. So what I think these retailers are doing is they're saving. They want to keep market share, which you would do it, and we've done that at Best Buy before. And you basically do what you can to cushion, because you don't know whether the inflation is going to, at least the energy inflation, you've got a question mark on that, just a small question mark, whether you're going to have some reprise, later in the year. So what you do is you cushion as much as you can, keep market share, and you sacrifice profits. That's a normal strategy, right? But it also is an indication that Walmart's results yesterday is an indication that they've had to do that way more than they thought. And find they may have got the mix slightly wrong, but it's so hard. They didn't know there was going to be a war this year. Nobody did. Nobody really predicted that Putin was going to do what he was going to say he was going to do, right? At least from a business perspective, people were not totally sure he was going to do that. So that's caused all kinds of disruption in the game. So I think that they've executed really well. Jim Cramer's an idiot. He says the opposite, but now he's had to change his mind because the Target results showed similar patterns with a different market segment. Because Target market segment is huge huge focus on middle class parents and mothers particularly, but parents. And so you got the full family spend, and got people like Chris used to talk about it here, but full family spend, from food to clothes, own label clothes. So it's not a high level brand, right? So when they're showing that the average consumer is suffering, really suffering. So to me, all this is just indication that we've got a massive slowdown coming in the economy. It's obviously showing up in the markets, but Dollar Tree, I'm just looking at that, 17% down. Costco, 11% down. Lululemon, 8% down. Walgreens, 6%. Best Buy, 7% down. So everyone's getting that we're going to have a bit of a slowdown. And so
Yeah,
the reality
but
check with the,
Cal, can I
sorry,
ask you
yeah,
something?
yeah, go
Because
ahead,
I
sorry.
asked you, but Best Buy's got a pretty decent dividend. So does it get to be a buy at some point? Just as is the dividend sustainable?
Yeah, they'll keep paying the dividend, but I think they'll take a margin hit like everyone else to keep the market share. What I don't know about because I no insider information here. But what I don't know about how the categories work. I do know from the last recession in 2008, what people did was if you wanted to buy uh, a specific category that was a high price, right, consumer electronics, you went to you kind of got drawn to the specialist because you got a better service, you got the same price, and you maybe even got more discounts because they had higher volume of buying, right? So I imagine that they'll take market share if they're executing okay, normal. They'll take market share from Target, Walmart on consumer electronics because it's the coolest place to go and buy. They'll give you service, they'll do anything, and people will do that, right? And so they'll go to the best category leader, and you'll be discerning where you go. If you've got a limited amount of dollars, you want to make sure you spend it right. And if you want to upgrade your phone, you're going to go there. You're going to try and do that. You're going to buy a speaker. You're going to that kind of stuff. So and own label at Best Buy is flying. That's the business I used to part of my portfolio as well out of China. But it used to be a $5 billion business where you had your own label, Insignia TV, Dynex TV. You want to buy a piece of wire, you can buy a branded piece of wire, or you can buy one for like $4, which is own label. So I suspect that part of business is going to be okay. They'll take a little bit of hit to keep. They won't drop the dividend. I don't think. Yeah. So
So
anyway,
we're heading back to the headlines here. Thank you for that, Cal. Very insightful. And the big headline again is that Twitter's board says they're going to force Elon to close the deal at the agreed upon price, which was $54 per share. And Bloomberg says they have sources that despite Elon Musk's tweets, that Twitter and Musk's team and bankers are continuing to work to close the deal, including preparing the SEC filing. Bloomberg also reporting that Elon, who wanted to defeat the spam bots, is lying when he says bots are why he's backing away from buying Twitter at the agreed price, and that it's more to do with the stock downturn, the rest of the market going down, and that Elon Musk's Twitter deal would increase the Twitter's annual debt interest burden to an estimated 750 million to a billion, up from just 51 million in 2021. That can't be right. It couldn't have gone up that fast. Adding pressure to find revenue streams. Did they mean 510? Did they leave a zero off that? That would be crazy. Massive debt boom in a year. Next, Twitter loses more executives amid Musk's takeover bid. Twitter's service VP, Katarina Lane, head of data science, Max Schmeiser, and VP of product management, Ilya Brown. To that point, there was Project Veritas managed to make recordings of some secretive meetings that they had, which appeared to be in restaurants with some Twitter team members, in which those Twitter team members, there was two videos that I saw, both didn't know they were being recorded. That's how Project Veritas works. And they were explaining, they were saying some incredibly interesting things, that Twitter is incredibly far incredibly far left leaning, commie as fuck, and that they're not at all interested in free speech, and that they do silence the right, and a lot of the things that the far right have been claiming for a very long time about Twitter. These Twitter employees were essentially seeming to confess, allegedly confessing on unknowingly on video. So
Tyler, I discovered
yeah,
something about those videos. Like, I had no clue, but apparently these employees get trapped because they get asked to go out for a date with somebody that they get attracted to, and then it's like a whole project like that. Are people in this room aware of this? This is like, it never used
that's
to happen in my day. No, I mean,
that's
maybe,
that's what we call investigative journalism.
but these guys, there's a whole Project Veritas or something, right?
Yeah,
These guys, people volunteer and they kind of go and do this, and literally that video that they have of this guy, he's on a date, right? So he's
right,
like spilling out, and they have the video, and he's like literally on a date. It's just bizarre. It's
right,
amazing.
right,
It,
Well, you know
it's
what,
it
what I
journalists.
found interesting was that I don't know if you saw the second video, but on the second video, that guy pulls out that email from Twitter management telling them that there's people out there
right,
trying to get dates with them so they
Yes,
could
that's the one
video.
I saw.
right.
Yeah. I'm
Bizarre.
like, so they even know it. Anyways, this is the organization that Dorsey left behind. So that guy insulted Elon because he has Asperger's. I mean, he made comments on there. That guy's going to regret for life.
Hey,
Well, and,
Carl, I
and
did
that
want to
and
make a
that's
point.
that's what's most upsetting about this, and we talked about this briefly yesterday, is that this masquerading as journalism, where you entrap someone, ruin their career to advance your quote journalism career, is really a horrifying corruption of journalism. And we've seen journalism really crash and burn in terms of checking sources, corroborating stories. And now we have, quote, undercover journalists who are pretending to be on a date. So a lie, a premise of a lie, to get hot information and ruin someone's career who thinks they're on a date. This is real. I mean, if this goes unfettered, the whole notion of investigative reporting and journalism is going to be corrupted by this. It's very worrisome.
Hey, Carl, I did want to make a very important point that Elon's deal with Twitter has what's called a specific performance clause that he agreed to that allows them to sue him for not completing the deal beyond $1 billion as long as the debt financing remains in place. So as long as that debt financing is available, he's supposed to complete the deal, and he agreed to basically that he could be sued to complete the deal. So that is in the
Okay,
contract. It's called specific performance clause. Yeah.
okay. So next up, China's top economic official, quite a significant role, I imagine, meets dozens of China's tech executives and industry experts, pledging support, quote unquote, for Chinese tech companies. Oh boy, I can just imagine the eye rolls when they heard that. Um, Pledging China's support for their Chinese tech companies amid deepening economic slump. Beijing's top economic official holds meetings with tech executives and industry experts. And that one's a little hard to swallow because China has been brutal and ruthless in cracking down on their big tech companies. My God, holy cow! Unlike anything you could really ever imagine, what China's done to their big tech, most successful, biggest tech success stories. That are in every way equal to America's biggest tech companies like Google and Apple. I mean, they are at that scale, and Facebook and all of them. And when I'm talking about Alibaba, JD, Pinduoduo, on and on, they have Meituan, all of these. And these companies have been so bashed and stripped bare that the leaders inevitably end up resigning and stepping down. And of course, when you bash all of your biggest, not only are these China's biggest tech companies, these are China's biggest companies. These are the world's biggest companies in the world. The biggest companies in the world are being brutalized and bashed in this kind of really bizarre way because the state wants such control over these companies. And the CEOs and the executives end up leaving in droves. And so for the China's, we knew the outcome of that was going to be calamitous for the Chinese economy. And now that it is, and now that the Chinese economy is in a real conundrum, Now, for the Chinese top economic official to have a meeting with these same tech executives to pledge support for them, I can just imagine how speechless these tech executives are. You just got done slaughtering my life's work because you want to control it, and now you're here to tell me that you want to support it. What kind of crazy hidden camera TV show is this that you have me on here? I what I would love to see the video footage of the expressions on these tech executives' faces as this Chinese top economic official explains his undying support for these tech companies that he just got done destroying. And then obviously,
I tell you who I have like absolutely no um, sympathy for if they lose money are you've got all these uh, U.S. banks, right, investment banks that upgrade China on the basis of these statements, Chinese stock, right, without any relation to patterns of behavior, right? So suddenly they go, well, and 2 or 3 days ago, I think it was what is J.P. Morgan, maybe a couple of others were like doing their usual Wall Street upgrades on the basis of these statements from the Chinese leaders, right? And there's this like, how can you even try? Like, why would you think it's a good investment when you have no clue when somebody's going to pull the rug from under your feet? No clue, right? Anyway, it's even worse for the entrepreneurs, as you're saying, right?
Tencent and all of them, it's just incredible. Next one is from Bloomberg. They say they have sources that Apple's former director of machine learning has left due to the company's return to work policy and is joining Alphabet's DeepMind. And boy, the press is going really deep into the paint on the story of Apple employees revolting about having to go back to work. I've seen just a really impressive amount of press coverage about this rather not impressive story that companies want their employees to go back to work. Well, there's a lot of companies doing that, but why the press is tech press is fixated on the Apple version of that, I'm a little confused.
So Cheryl just pinned something I had tweeted out, by the way, yesterday, that Apple is delaying its plan to require staff to be back in the office, and they're blaming COVID, but I think really what it is more employee retention issues. I wish Matt was still here because he and I were back channeling on that. It's more about that, and I don't think Apple wants to admit that they're giving into this employee pressure about where they can work, as opposed to a resurgence of COVID.
Right. I see the link. Yep. The next is that Netflix cuts 150 jobs out of 11,000 across departments in a new round of layoffs, mostly in the US, as the company reins in costs amid slowing revenue growth. And the next is from the
That's
financial.
that's barely that's barely 1% of their workforce. I don't know why that's news.
Right. Financial Times, Saudi Arabia's public investment fund takes a 5% stake in Nintendo. New York Times says that celebrities have been criticized for hyping cryptos without highlighting the risks after this month's sell-off as Crypto.com and FTX scale back on ad spending. Bloomberg says they've done research that despite China's crypto mining ban, its global Bitcoin hash rate share grew to 21% from September 2021 to January 2022, suggesting a rise in covert mining. Master School, a network of virtual coding schools that takes 10% of monthly income to repay tuition, raises $100 million. New York Times does a profile on Do Kwon, the trash-talking founder of Terraform Labs, which raised $200 million to build Luna, which recently went bust. And many investors avoided losses by cashing out early, but the New York Times is now doing a profile on that founder. And what else? Google Cloud launches new security supply chain. Google's Russian subsidiary plans to file for bankruptcy, saying it is impossible to pay employees and suppliers after authorities seized the bank accounts. So Google's now gone in Russia. And addressing complaints by rivals, Microsoft begins relaxing its cloud licensing rules in Europe, which made running its software on other clouds more expensive. And Dutch buy now pay later service raises 85 million. Amazon launches smart commerce in India, helping stores create online storefronts and offering tools for billing and inventory management. Here comes digitized e-commerce writ large in India. God knows they've got the delivery stuff worked on. And then a whole bunch of
Back
fun.
up for a
Yes.
second. You said something about this Dutch thing that raised money. Was that a buy now pay later company?
Yes.
That's amazing that they were able to raise money given what's happened to a firm stock and everything. I mean, it really is. You know, when you think about it.
Yeah. It's just the rest of the headlines are a bunch of. Well, here's one. Robinhood is working on a second crypto wallet which will give users sole custody of their private keys, coming in beta this summer. And a report details the challenges that delayed Apple's mixed reality headset launch by years. And amid initial pushback from Johnny Ive's team on VR headset concepts, and they're definitely overdue to reveal something. And they have a big event coming up very soon, which they're going to have to talk about AR and VR extensively at that event, no doubt. That's the Worldwide Developer Conference, which should be happening any day now, really. MasterCard tests facial recognition software, letting users who opt in pay with a smile or a wave, using tech from others that enables this. And I believe, with Cal, was that you who sent in a DM about MasterCard enables paying with your hand or your...
Yeah. I was curious. That goes down to our our normal kind of discussion about collection of data and etc. But is it fingerprints, as I recall, fingerprints and also facial recognition, right?
Can you find that link that you
Yeah,
shared?
I'll find it. Yeah, I'll find it. Yeah.
Because I want to know if these are separate stories. Because
Yeah.
MasterCard testing facial recognition and letting people pay with a smile or a wave is very
I think it's the
interesting.
same one.
It's
Facial
It's,
it's it's
recognition
from
and biometric.
yesterday.
Yep,
It's from
we
yesterday. We
discussed
talked about
yesterday.
it.
I know, but the Cal's one said pay with your hand or your face or head.
Yes, I think it's palm and facial recognition.
Palm
But
or
that's,
face, yeah, but either way, it's a bad idea.
palm and waving are two different things.
No, I think it's palm. Scan
You
the
wave your
palm
palm.
and facial recognition.
Okay.
But I think
So,
both are bad ideas because it's easy to be breached. Yeah.
well, it's a truly bizarre coincidence that
Yeah, I put ours in the back channel, just in
okay.
the
Oh,
in the
and
Twitter chat. Yeah, but it's probably the
Tanner,
same one you
the,
guys are talking.
the palm scanning is already in Whole Foods from Amazon, so
Yes.
it's not yeah. So fun.
Yeah, by the way, so MasterCard's working on that, and it is seemingly inevitable. The truly bizarre, one of the most bizarre predictions of all time is in the Bible, in the book of Revelations, that the future of payments will be done by your hand or your head, and that you will know that this is the mark of the beast. And the beast is the embodiment of everything evil in this story. And the beast will literally force everybody to adopt payment by hand or by head, by the mark on your head or your hand. And so everybody who ever went to Sunday school is very familiar with this. And it's a really bizarre prediction that we now are on the precipice of Amazon and MasterCard and these companies rolling out payment by your hand and your face. This is really bizarre. It's a really bizarre prediction, especially at a time when there was no conceivable way that you would need to pay. It made no sense. This prediction made no sense whatsoever until relatively recently. It's bizarre. It's truly bizarre. Anyway, Apple announces new accessibility features, including mirroring watch apps on iPhones and live captioning tools for iOS and macOS coming next year. Okay, so those are your big boring headlines. Now we get into the tweets, as we always do, with the 20 minutes we have left. The first tweet that I have is, Katerina covered the one about China tries to make nice with big tech as economic challenges mount. China is trying once again to lift the spirits of its huge tech industry after a bruising regulatory offensive that has weakened some of its biggest businesses. Yeah, that's one way to say it. The next, also from Katerina via Bloomberg, what Turkey wants from Sweden and Finland in NATO expansion spat, as Turkey threatens to block bids to join NATO by Sweden and Finland in the wake of Russian invasion in Ukraine. Bloomberg spoke with three senior Turkish figures to figure out what exactly is going on here. And indeed, it's just they want concessions, basically. They want, it's an issue to do with the Kurds, basically. Turkey is insisting that any new candidates for NATO membership recognize its concerns about the Kurdish militias, both inside of Turkey and across the borders in Syria and Iraq. Turkey is demanding that Sweden and Finland publicly denounce not only the PKK, which I guess is the Kurdish military, but also its affiliates before being allowed to join the bloc. Okay, so this is all just negotiations at the end of the day.
Hey, Tyler.
Yeah, 1 second.
Yeah,
Turkey also wants Sweden and Finland to put an end to arms export restrictions they imposed on Turkey, along with several other European members after its 2019 incursion. So again, there's a second point, and those are kind of the two. There's a few other demands. Turkey wants to be re-included in the F-35 advanced aircraft program. And there you go. Go ahead, John.
Yeah, I couldn't get off mute fast enough. You juxtapose two news items that are seemingly unrelated, but I suspect I'm not the only one who saw a connection. So if you look at mirroring devices and pervasive facial recognition as logon, is this not a passport for personal spying at scale?
Yeah, there's second order, third order effects that are that is almost the norm. That think there's much more than meets the eye, no pun intended, when it comes to moves around security. I guess is one way to address it. The next one from the Wall Street Journal: that a Russian, a 21-year-old Russian tank unit commander has admitted to killing a Ukrainian civilian in a war crimes trial. The 21-year-old admitted to shooting an unarmed civilian in Ukraine's first war crimes trial. There you go. The next is, what do we have? Oh, here's the next one. From Paul Moser in China, who covered China for the New York Times, and tech in China was kind of his thing. And he did a tweet saying that he noticed recently that he's watching the coverage of Russia's invasion of Ukraine in China on Chinese media. He says it remains amazing how the world in which Russia is winning the war persists in China, in Chinese media. This bit of war porn showing the flashbang of Russian weapons says that Putin will have it all wrapped up by May 20th. Much support for Russia in the comments as well, by people responding to the Chinese media. That why, and that raises, in my mind, the obvious question, why is Chinese media, and it's state-driven media, so positive on Russia and making claims that Russia's winning their offensive and that they're going to have a good go of everything over there? It's quite interesting, despite China's positioning that they're, to the Western perspective, they're trying to distance themselves from Russia, but in reality, their actions seem to indicate otherwise.
And
So,
oh, what a tangled web we weave does have a bad end game.
yeah. Um, hold on one second. I gotta see on my calendar. I just had an alarm that in. Okay. Okay, I'm fine. Okay, so the next one is that I found that Twitter is launching something that I said they should launch. And here now they're launching it. I just retweeted it to the Tech News Twitter account. You can see it with your own eyes. It says that super follower, it's called super follow spaces, which is two different things joining forces. It's their version of Clubhouse called Twitter Spaces, and their version of OnlyFans called Super Followers, where you pay to get exclusive content from somebody on Twitter, exclusive tweets. And now they have something called Super Follow Spaces, so that a content creator can create a Twitter space for their only for their super followers. And you probably, if you joined us every day for a year now, you've heard me share the inevitable vision of exactly this, that Taylor Swift will be able to create a clubhouse room for her fans and perform a concert for her fans that pay money every month to be her fans. And this is a potentially very lucrative if they can get it adopted. So let's see what happens with these paid Twitter Spaces, essentially for the superfans. By the way, it's also an audio version of OnlyFans as well. So you could have people doing audio porn and people paying for that. It's like OnlyFans without the photo or video, but only the audio. That in itself could be very interesting. So the next is from Jeff G from CNN. You guys remember the China airplane that fell from the sky and exploded
Yes, that's
about
right.
a couple
March, yeah.
months ago? Yeah,
No survivor.
right. Well, it was unclear what caused it, but now CNN is reporting that the flight data suggests that the plane deliberately crashed. Black box data recovered from a China Eastern flight that crashed in March suggests someone in the cockpit intentionally downed the plane.
Actually, it matches one of the government said rumors in the beginning. It says the co-pilot actually it's his way to revenge because first of all he was demoted as the co-pilot, and secondly he lost almost all his fortune to the Evergrande investment. And
Oh boy.
actually, it said he left a will about why he did this at his hotel. So, but this kind of news were removed at all in back in March. But right now, the black box, the message from this actually matches all this information at the beginning. So, but it's glad that in the end China didn't insist that they cracked the black box themselves. And Boeing, of course, actually it's Boeing's airplane, so originally it should be investigated by Boeing and the U.S. Flight. Association something I forgot the name, but yeah, that's the. But actually, it was leaked to Wall Street Journal first, and then so it said it's not. So you can see the title. It's not a confirmation, but we are close to the truth here.
Is this the one that hit the ground with nearly a 90-degree nose down attitude?
Yes,
Is that
yes,
the one?
yes.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah,
that so
that
that
was.
that
Exactly the one.
that looks
But
intentional
actually,
from
they
the word
said
go.
yeah,
Yeah.
the conversation were heard by the tower as well, but they didn't let the conversation out. Yeah.
Yeah, there's not too many scenarios in which a plane goes headfirst into the ground like that for any other reason apart from it's being controlled into the ground like that. They generally, that's not a stable position for a plane to stay in. It doesn't want to sit like that. So that was my first thought when I saw it, but you've got to get the data from the black box. So.
Now they have. So the next one is from BB that liveness tests used by banks to verify identifications are extremely vulnerable to deepfake attacks. Attackers can simply swap their faces for somebody else. and make financial fraud much easier. So let's hope they find a new way to prove identity. And the next is from Jeff G. from the New York Times, that all those celebrities pushing crypto are not so vocal now that cryptos are falling from the sky. And Jeff G. also has this one from Wired, that a hacktivist website lets you prank call Russian officials. To protest the war in Ukraine, a website called wasterussiantime.today auto dials Russian government officials, connects them to each other, and lets you listen into their conversations. And the next is from BB, from CNN, that a headband, which is a data tracker, could shed light on your insomnia. An Israeli startup has developed medical-grade sleep testing technology that you can use in the comfort of your own home. And another way to say that is that what used to be professional-grade medical equipment is now becoming consumer ready and consumer available, and a whole lot of data coming your way. The next from
Yeah,
BB.
let me just add to that
Go ahead.
that traditional high margin sleep labs where you spend the night in a foreign uncomfortable lab um, misrepresent what actually happens at home. So not only are these new devices, and there are many of them, medical grade, but it actually reveals what's going on in your normal sleep as opposed to what happens in a sleep lab. So this is going to be a death knell to sleep labs, and provide much better data and information directly to the consumer. So it's how to interpret the data, how to use the data to get better sleep, because poor sleep is a direct cause of obesity and all the cascade of lifestyle disorders. This is really of profound benefit.
John, they tried to sell me a sleep lab for years. They would be like, oh, you must have sleep apnea because you snore, and I refused to go, mainly because they wouldn't let me bring a dog, and I sleep with a dog. And that was a perfect excuse because they wouldn't let me bring the dog. So then I couldn't go to the sleep lab. So then I got the Aura Ring, and I've been wearing the Aura Ring for 3 years, and I sleep at 95 or 96% efficiency. And so, whatever it is that I have, it's interrupting nothing. And I saved the money I would have paid the sleep lab. The Aura Ring, interestingly enough, knew when I had COVID because it adjusted my readiness score down. My readiness score is usually in the 80s, and it put it down into the 60s and 70s, which made me know that I had to adjust my exercise. So yeah, it's
Oh,
pretty
and
interesting.
for the thank you, Dr. Francine, for the mathematicians in the room, QED.
Oh yeah, right, QED.
So my only experience of a sleep lab was being effectively tortured for a TV show for the public entertainment, where I was deprived of sleep. Me and other people were deprived of sleep for 48 hours continuous with an EEG to make sure we weren't sleeping. In fact, I got penalised for 4 seconds of sleep in 48 hours to give you an idea of how precise they were being. And then we were allowed to nap briefly after 48 hours without sleep. And then woken up every half an hour to do numeric tasks. So you woke up for half an hour, did a numeric attention task, allowed to sleep for half an hour, woken up with loud noise, and repeated that for I don't know how long. Felt like days. I think it was about 20 cycles. So that was fun. So that was my experience of the sleep lab. I actually quite enjoyed it sadistically, but yeah, I don't think they're all like that.
Was that research or a TV show?
It
And
was a
if so,
TV.
what TV show? What
It,
episode?
it was a TV show, and I actually can't get the recording of it anymore. But it's called Superhuman on Channel 4. I'm on IMDb for it. It's a stupid little role, but I can't actually find a fucking recording. So if anybody knows where to find a recording so I can show my kids, let me know.
So the next one is from Pat, that new data rules are being pursued to keep out China and Russia from data centers, essentially. Japan, US, South Korea seek alternative to the APEC framework. So it's Japan, US, Korea, Canada, Taiwan, Philippines, Singapore have agreed to establish a new global cross cross-border privacy rules framework independent of the APEC and will effectively accept participation by non-APEC members, but essentially they're shaping up to cut out Russia and China from ostensibly the interwebs, from data transfer rules. You wouldn't be able to transfer data with them. Wow. Here we go. The great decoupling. China and Russia and their friends. You'd think Tajikistan and Uzbekistan
Oh yeah.
and North Korea versus the West, as it's called. So thank you for that one, Pat. The next one is from Matt Hughes, which says, why Chinese sellers are quitting Amazon. Amazon once helped Chinese exporters reach huge and lucrative audiences. Now they urgently need to wean themselves off. And I imagine this had something to do with all of the fake reviews that the Chinese were being punished for paying for fake reviews. They had created marketplaces to pay pennies for fake reviews, and then they got punished for it and banned thousands of accounts.
Exactly.
Is that Matt? Is that what
Yeah.
it's about?
Yeah. It's about that. Just the fake reviews, the I guess hume bots, right? So just humans acting as bots for
Right,
to influence proper reviews.
right, and it was very clever because when you're shopping, people do look at the reviews, and the reviews are a big part of the ranking, and both the ranking and the consumer decision to purchase is based on reviews. So if you can generate fake reviews, it gives you a beautiful advantage. However, if your product is crap, this has just becomes outright fraud. I mean, it's one thing if you're selling what you say you're selling, and then, no harm, no foul. They bought what they thought they were getting. The problem is when they get something and the object that they purchase is, a quarter of the size of what they thought it was going to be, and you end up with a trash can, for a doll-sized trash can, and this is what, in part, what was happening was that they were selling blenders, the size of your hand.
Yeah.
And I experienced this myself living in Thailand, and every time I fell for this myself multiple times. But they were quite funny moments. When you open up a vegetable juicer, again the size of your hand, made for incredibly miniature vegetables, no doubt. So anyway,
And I think too, if you could take this and apply it to any review based product or service. Wouldn't it be great if we could actually get the absolute value, the real review? Is it really 3.75? Is it 4.25? So it's an interesting use case that you could take across every B2B or B2C company, probably more present in B2C, but then the question becomes, okay, who's going to want to identify it and who's going to pay for it? It's like it's kind of the $1 billion problem that we go back to with Musk, right? It's interesting at the account level, but what if we did that across every B2B or B2C company in the US or globally? It would be an interesting outcome. But then the problem becomes who's going to pay for it? Last comment.
the next is from Poppy, that a new generation of nanobots can kill bacteria in your teeth. Scientists from the Indian Institute of Science, which is one of India's very prestigious universities, in collaboration with somebody else, incubated a startup called Thera Nautilus, and they've developed tiny nanobots that kill bacteria in your teeth. So now we can all stop brushing thanks to nanobots. There we go. We did it. We reached the future there. And the next one is from Bibi, also about India, how India's wheat export ban is affecting global food prices. The lack of Russian wheat exports due to the war in Ukraine and poor harvest and countries depleting global supplies have caused wheat prices to increase and causing other places to ban the exports of their wheat like India's done, and that's going to drive up prices for everybody else. Katerina found this one about a new law which unchains the future of fusion energy. Physicists at the EPFL within a large European collaboration, have revised one of the fundamental laws that has been foundational to plasma infusion research. And now, hopefully, we can achieve this in our lifetimes. And there seems to be an incredible uptick in momentum and pace with the progress that's being made to enable this. So, fingers crossed, this could be the holy grail that saves us from climate change if we do manage to pull this off. So the next is that MasterCard launches Smile to Pay. That's from Monica. We covered that one. Thank you, Monica. And Google is sharing our data at a startling scale. And thank you to the person who sent this in the DMs. It says, along with Pixel phones, watches, and earbuds at Google's annual showcase of software and devices last week came a pair of nifty-looking translation glasses. Put them on, and in real time, subtitles appear on the lenses as you watch a person speaking in a different language. But the glasses aren't commercially available. It's also unlikely they will make anywhere near as much money as advertising does for Google's parent company Alphabet. Of the company's $68 billion in total revenue from the quarter, about $54 billion came from advertising. Right, because it's an advertising company. They barely do much in hardware, unlike Apple. The scope, anyway, so it goes on to say that basically the way that Google does hardware is they subsidize the price because they're able to extract value via the data. But if you're a geek, you've known that forever. And the Washington Post is not read by geeks necessarily, so they're explaining it to their very Luddite audience who doesn't understand the things that we all know very well. So the next one is that a PCR test is now happening that produces results in 27 minutes, has been granted emergency use authorization by the FDA, the Federal Drug Administration. So now PCR tests no longer will take hours and hours and hours. They will be done in under 30 minutes, 27 minutes. A company called Microgem, based in Virginia, has been granted the emergency use authorization by the FDA for their new COVID PCR saliva test, which provides PCR results at the point of care in 27 minutes. There we go. That's fantastic news. There we go. And we must pause there, as I said, at the top of the hour, because 1 hour from now, I have another event to host. So follow me if you want to get notified about that. And I hope you do. And it'll be a fun conversation about the future of autonomous vehicles and
On
self-driving.
Clubhouse. On
Yes,
Clubhouse. Oh,
on
good. Yeah.
Clubhouse. Yeah.
Keep
Yeah,
an eye for
I've
that.
pinned
Yeah.
it on top. Pin it on top of the room now.
And it's with Mike Butcher, the editor
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
for
The UK.
TechCrunch there out of London, who I've known for damn near 20 years. And it should be a good time. So I hope you join us for that. And thank you for joining us today. And we will do it again tomorrow. And have a wonderful rest of your day wherever you happen to be, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tyler.
Thank you.
Tyler, thank
Sure.
you, and
See you
ciao.
later.
And enjoy your time
Thank
being
you.
Swift and
Thanks,
Tyler.
everyone.
Thanks, everyone.